Hello, I'm Teresita Reyes, and this is my Module 9 case study. Okay, to summarize the case, the problem takes place in Rocket Junior High. The people involved are the assistant principal, Richard Inman, who is his first year as an assistant principal, James, a muscular teenager, 15 years old, who's the leader of the group from Southside, and David Ramos, who is a young honor student and also it's a standout trombonist in the band. The police officer is also involved, a teacher that witnessed an exchange between the two students, the mothers of both of the students, and the director of the secondary education. What happened was that Mr. Amon is building a relationship with his students, so he stays after school to play basketball with them, and his relationship is going well with James. He's fighting a lot less, so he's even done a record for him, so that relationship is going well. In this particular day, Mr. Amon called James to the office because he had 3 tardies, and so he was going to talk to him about that. But as he was going to the principal's office, a teacher saw him giving something else to a student, and she assumed that it was drugs. So she called the principal, and the principal asked the police officer to escort David to his office also. So when he had the 2 students and the officer in his office, he started asking them what happened. James said that he gave something to David so he could keep it for him. David was nervous, almost crying, and he didn't speak at all. So the officer searched him and found some brass knuckles, and that's a prohibited weapon in the school, and it's also considered a felony. So the officer handcuffed David, and David started crying, and he broke. So James admitted that those weapons were his, and that he had threatened David that if he didn't take them or if he said something, he was going to kick him. And he was going to be bad to him. So that's why David didn't want to talk. He didn't want to get hurt. But once that James admitted it, Mr. Inman thought that the officer was going to release David because he was innocent. But since he was in the possession of the weapons, he couldn't be released. It was a felony, so they were both going to be sent to jail. And according to the zero tolerance policy that the school has, both of the students had to be expelled for at least 45 days, and they had to be sent to the disciplinary alternative education program. So after that, Mr. Amon called the mothers of the students. James' mom was not surprised. She already knew that her son got in trouble a lot, so she was not surprised. But David's mom, very good student and never got in trouble, was very mad, so she went to school to figure out what was happening and why her son was sent to jail, because he was innocent. He was victim of bullying. A week later, Mr. Inman filed the paperwork to send James to for him to be expelled, but he he couldn't do it for David because he knew that he was innocent. So he decided not to file paperwork on David. And a week later, the director of secondary education called him to advise him to complete the paperwork for David. And if he didn't do it, he was going to have to give him an official reprimand. And that will stay in his record. So Mr. Amon is going to have to take a tough decision. So the legal and ethical issues are the legal issues, the possession of prohibited weapons, the search of a minor, breaking the zero tolerance policy. David parents might take legal actions. The ethical issues are consequences for David when he is a victim of bullying, breaking the trust of students that the principal will take care of them, and should Mr. Inman put David first or his career? So, what happened in a very synthesized manner? James threatened David to hold a prohibited weapon in the school. The officer found the weapon while they were being interrogated in Mr. Inman's office. Both boys were sent to jail and accused of a felony. Mr. Inman regretted his decision and didn't complete the expulsion paperwork for David, which is causing him to have an official reprimand. The facts. So the people involved in this issue were Mr. Inman, the assistant principal, James, the one that brought the weapon to the school, David, the innocent victim that was bullying to carry that weapon, the teacher who witnessed the transaction between the boys, the police officer who made the arrest and searched David to find the weapon, the mothers of both of the boys, and the Directory of Secondary Education. It took place at Rocket Junior High at the principal's office. It's in the south side of town, and it's a public school. The programs, well, David, it's in the honors program, and it's a standout band member. Well, the next section is how it harms others. Well, in this situation, David is the one that's going to be mostly harmed because he's a victim of bullying, but he's going to have to pay the consequences of having a weapon with him at school. So, with this, his dreams, his future plans are going to have to change because all of this is going to stay in his record, so it's going to affect his college applications. For Mr. Inman, will also harm him because if he doesn't finalize the paperwork, he will have an official reprimand in his file. But if he expulses David, his credibility, well, if he doesn't expulse David, his credibility in the school will be affected. So since Mr. Inman is an assistant principal, where is the head principal? Was he or she informed about the situation? Did he or she take action in this? Or what happened? My position and the possible consequences. By taking no action, Mr. Inman and David will not have any consequences, but James will continue being a bully. So if nothing is done, if everybody acts like nothing happened, it's going to be bad for the school. with the action that Mr. Inman took, he got David in trouble instead of protecting him. And for me, the ethic thing is for Mr. Inman to not expel David, continue what he was doing, that he didn't turn the paperwork and that David was back in school. And I know that that's going to put him in trouble because now he's going to have the reference in his papers, but I think that since he was doing the right thing to do, it wouldn't affect him very much. According to Moore, highly effective principals have the confidence to lead despite their critics. So I'm pretty sure that if he's confident in what he's doing is right, it won't affect him as much. Okay, so the other actions would be that, and for me it would be the best action to do, is to call both of the boys to the office, but talk to them one by one, not both together, and definitely not with the police officer in the office. So when you're talking to David, maybe you can call the counselor to help him be more calm and feel comfortable talking. And when James admits that he had the weapon, just make sure that he knows that it has consequences, that he's going to have to pay the acts of the actions he took. And by doing this, Mr. Inman will have the relationship with his students and would not get David in trouble. Well, with what I said on the last slide, both of the first option was the worst of them. If you don't do nothing, nothing's going to change, and the school's not going to be in a good place, and Mr. Inman will show that he's not a good leader. The only pro on that is that not David or Mr. Inman will get in trouble. For me, the best option is the one where you call the students one by one, and that way they both give their side of the story. They don't feel pressure about the other one, and you won't get David in trouble because you'll know that he's a victim of bullying. So, making the decision to speak to each student on its own will take us to a new problem and opportunities, but I think that communicating with the head principal and the parents and giving all the facts is going to make it easier, and it's required to do that, so that will be good. And making some changes to the zero tolerance policy might be a thing to consider in the near future to make sure that that does not happen again. So if I was in this situation and I had to implement this, I would call David to the office first and ask him what happened, and if he was truthful and told me that James was threatening him to keep the weapon, it would be easier for me to protect him. But if he doesn't want to answer, I might call the counselor or his parents or somebody to make him feel comfortable and talk to me, and then we can take action. After that, I will communicate with the head principal. Once I have David's version of the story, I would communicate with the principal, the police officer, and the parents, and I will also contact James and his mother and explain that he's going to have to pay the consequences of bringing a weapon to school. he's going to have to go to jail, and